Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. I never imagined I'd live to see the day when my own home would feel like a stranger's house. Yet there I was, standing in the living room that once echoed with laughter, staring at the woman I used to call my wife, now sitting comfortably beside another man on our couch. Her name is Claire. We've been married for nearly 12 years. We built this house together, brick by brick, dream by dream. I remember how excited she was the day we moved in, barefoot, twirling in the empty living room, saying, "This house will be our forever." But forever didn't last long. It started with subtle distance, nights when she'd stay out late, claiming work dinners, or the times she'd scroll through her phone, smiling at texts she'd never let me see. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, so I convinced myself it was stress, not betrayal. Until one night, I found a message on her phone. A man named Derek had sent, "Can't wait to hold you again." That was the night something in me broke, quietly. I didn't confront her right away. I just sat there, staring at the glowing screen, realizing I'd been replaced long before she decided to leave me. A month later, she filed for divorce. No fights. No apologies, just cold signatures on warm memories. She said she needed to find herself. What she really meant was, she'd already found someone else. The divorce went smoothly. Too smoothly, actually. She kept the house, citing it as part of the settlement since her name was also on the papers. I didn't argue. I was tired of fighting for something that had already been emotionally taken from me. But the real hit came 2 months later. I dropped by to collect a few things I'd left behind. A few photo albums, my father's watch, and some documents. When I opened the door, I froze. There he was, Derek, the same man I'd seen in the text. He was sitting casually on the couch, barefoot, holding a mug that used to be mine. Claire smiled awkwardly when she saw me. "Oh, James, you're early. I didn't expect you." Her tone was calm, almost rehearsed. I stood there, gripping the doorframe, every muscle tense. "Yeah," I said quietly. Didn't think I'd have to make an appointment to enter my house. She flinched but didn't respond. Derek stood, tried to appear polite. "Hey, man," he said, extending his hand as if we were meeting at a barbecue. "I'm Derek." I stared at his hand, then at Claire. "I know who you are." Silence stretched across the room like a taut wire. Claire cleared her throat and said softly, "Let's not do this. Please, James. It's over. You have your life now, and I have mine." Her words sliced through me sharper than any knife. My life? What life? She had taken everything that made life feel alive. I nodded slowly. "You're right," I said. "It's over." I didn't stay long. I grabbed my things, avoiding eye contact, pretending I didn't notice how comfortably he fit into the space that once belonged to us. To me. But before I left, I turned around one last time and said, "Take care of the house. I hope it treats you both better than it treated me." That was the first and last time I stepped foot in that home. After the divorce, I moved into a small apartment downtown. It was nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, creaky floors, and a window that faced the street instead of the sky. But it was quiet, peaceful, mine. I tried to rebuild my life piece by piece. Work became my escape. I buried myself in projects, late nights, anything that would keep my mind away from the thought of her. Still, loneliness has a cruel way of sneaking in. It doesn't knock. It just sits beside you when you least expect it. When you're cooking for one, watching TV alone, or waking up to an empty bed that used to hold warmth. One night, while scrolling through old photos, I stumbled upon one from our wedding day. Claire's smile was radiant, genuine, the kind that made you believe in forever. I stared at it for a long time before finally setting it down. That man in the photo, the one holding her hand with unshakable faith, he didn't exist anymore. I was someone else now. Someone learning how to live after love dies. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, I began to heal, or at least I thought I was, until fate decided to twist the knife again. Claire called me one afternoon. Her voice was polite, almost distant. "Hey, James," she began. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to ask if you could stop by. There are a few things we need to settle about the accounts and property funds. I hesitated, but agreed. I still had a joint investment account tied to the house, and I wanted everything closed cleanly. When I arrived, I noticed small changes. The flowers in the garden had been replaced, the furniture rearranged. It was no longer our home. It was theirs. She offered me coffee, acting as if we were old friends catching up. Derek wasn't home this time, but his presence lingered in the air. The faint smell of his cologne, a jacket draped over the chair, a pair of boots near the door. As we went over the documents, I noticed something off. The financial statement showed that a large sum from our joint investment account had been withdrawn after the divorce was finalized. Claire, I said, trying to stay calm, why is there a $60,000 withdrawal from the joint fund? That wasn't part of the settlement. Her face stiffened. I use it for house renovations, she said quickly. You know, fixing the roof, repainting the patio. I cut her off. Renovations or Derek's new car outside. Her expression changed instantly. James, please, don't make this ugly. Ugly? I laughed bitterly. You brought another man into the home we built together, and I'm the one making it ugly? She didn't respond. Instead, she just looked at me, maybe with guilt, maybe with exhaustion. I couldn't tell anymore. That was the moment I realized something important. She didn't just move on emotionally. She had moved on financially, too. I stood up, collected my folder, and said quietly, you can have the house, the furniture, even the memories, but the money, that's mine. I'm done paying for a life that doesn't include me. Before she could reply, I walked out. That night, I withdrew every cent left in my personal accounts, including the funds I had invested over the years. She had taken enough, emotionally, physically, financially. I wasn't going to let her and her new man live off what I worked for. I transferred my savings into a new account, cut all ties, and left without another word. The next morning, I handed in my resignation at work. My boss was surprised. You're one of our best, James. You sure about this? I smiled faintly. I need a fresh start, somewhere far from here. He nodded slowly. Then go find it. And so I did. I sold the remaining stocks, cashed in my savings, and bought a one-way ticket to another city. It wasn't about running away. It was about reclaiming my peace. But before I left, I drove one last time past the house. The lights were on. Laughter spilled through the open window, hers and his. I stopped for a moment, letting the sound sting and heal me all at once. Then I whispered to myself, "Goodbye, Claire." And with that, I drove away. Starting over wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. I moved to a small coastal town, far from the city, far from the streets that carried memories of her laughter. I rented a modest apartment that overlooked the ocean. The first morning there, I sat by the window, coffee in hand, and watched the sunrise. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. The first few weeks were strange. I didn't know anyone, didn't have anywhere to be, and no one expected me home at a certain time. For 12 years, my life had revolved around someone else's schedule, dinners, anniversaries, arguments, reconciliations. Now it revolved around me. I found a local construction company looking for a project manager. The work wasn't glamorous, but it kept me busy. It felt good to use my skills to build something new, something unconnected to the life I'd left behind. In the evenings, I'd walk along the beach, feeling the sand between my toes and the cool breeze on my face. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about Claire, wondering if she missed me or even thought of me. But every time I started to drift into that thought, I'd remind myself, she made her choice. Months went by. I built routines, small ones, morning jogs, quiet dinners, weekend fishing trips. Life became simpler, lighter. One evening, while sitting at a seaside cafe, a woman approached me. She was around my age, maybe a little younger, carrying a camera and a smile that seemed to belong to the ocean itself. "Is the seat taken?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, go ahead." Her name was Lila. She was a freelance photographer who had moved to town a few months before me. Our conversation began casually. weather, photography, the beauty of the town, but somehow stretched into hours. I hadn't laughed that easily in years. From that day, we began to see each other more often. Dinners, beach walks, movie nights. She had a quiet kindness about her, the kind that didn't demand attention, but somehow held it. One night, we sat under the stars, sharing stories about our pasts. When she asked about mine, I hesitated but decided to be honest. I was married, I said. She moved on. I guess I wasn't enough for her. Lila didn't say anything right away. She just looked at me with understanding eyes and said softly, "Sometimes being enough for someone else means losing yourself. Maybe it's time to be enough for you." Those words stayed with me for days. As months turned into a year, I began to see the world differently. Pain still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. I invested the money I had taken from my accounts into a small business, a construction and design firm with 2 local partners. Slowly it began to grow. I poured my energy into it, not for wealth, but for purpose. Lila became a constant in my life. Supportive, patient, never pushing me to forget the past, but gently reminding me that the future was still mine to shape. One afternoon, while organizing old files, I received an email that made my heart skip. It was from Claire. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. I hadn't heard from her in nearly 2 years. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Hi, James. I hope you're doing well. I know it's been a long time, and I'm not sure if you'll even read this. Things didn't turn out the way I expected. Derek and I were no longer together. I made mistakes, and I can finally admit that. I just want to say I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve how I treated you. If you're open to it, maybe we could talk." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the message. My first reaction wasn't anger or longing. It was peace. I thought back to the man who once couldn't breathe without her, the man who lost everything when she left. He had been broken, yes, but not destroyed. Now, I wasn't that man anymore. I replied simply, "Hi, Claire. I appreciate your message. I'm glad you reached out, and I hope you find happiness. But I've moved on, and I'm exactly where I need to be. Take care." I hit send, closed my laptop, and felt a quiet sense of closure wash over me. That night, Lila came over with a bottle of wine. She noticed my calm smile and asked, "Something good happened today?" "Something ended," I said softly, "and that's a good thing." A few weeks later, I got a call from a former neighbor back in the old city. He told me that Claire had sold the house. Apparently, after Derek left, she couldn't afford the mortgage and upkeep. She'd moved into a small apartment and started working at a local shop. I listened silently, thanking him for letting me know, and hung up. I didn't feel satisfaction or revenge, just finality. The chapter had closed completely. That house, once filled with love and laughter, was just wood and walls now. The life we built there crumbled, but somehow I had built a new one out of the ashes. Years passed. My company expanded. Lila and I eventually moved into a new home by the shore. Not a mansion, not even luxurious, but filled with peace and sincerity. One evening, as we watched the sunset from our porch, she asked me quietly, "Do you ever regret how things ended with her?" I smiled faintly. "No, because if she hadn't left, I never would have found myself again, and I never would have met you." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and in that moment, I realized something profound. Sometimes losing everything isn't the end. It's the beginning of the life you were meant to live. Months later, out of curiosity, I drove through my old city again. I passed the street where our old house used to stand. A new family lived there now. Children playing in the yard, a woman hanging laundry on the porch. I smiled. The house had found new life, and so had I. I didn't stop. I just drove past slowly, letting the memories fade into the distance like a song you've heard too many times. That night, back home, I stood by the window beside Lila, watching the ocean waves roll under the moonlight. I thought about how far I'd come, from the man who once walked away from everything, to the man who built a new world from nothing. I realized that sometimes walking away isn't defeat. It's choosing yourself over the ruins of what used to be. I whispered softly to the night, Thank you for leaving, Claire, because losing you helped me find me. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly free.